Part of this is an ode to Manhattan. I loved living in New York. I think it has just this extra energy. I felt like I was plugged into an electric socket when I was living there, and I wanted to be awake all the time so that I wouldn't miss out on anything. But the challenge was, how do you write about a place that is so well known and has been written about a million times and is featured in every movie and TV show? How can I make this unique? So that's where the comedy element came in. And the other thing is that story that I mentioned about the rise of stand-up comedy in the Middle East. So comedy's always had a beautiful thread in my own life. And through my husband and all the comedy shows that we attend together and getting to know comedians and that feeling backstage versus when you're on stage in front of the bright lights, how you might behave when you're doing your set versus mingling with people and you might be a little shyer, how hard it is to stand out or break into the industry. I got some real insight into how that works, the insider track. So I thought, okay, this is perfect. I started writing the book, and then The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel came out, and I was just crushed because I was like, oh, this idea that I had in my mind has been executed so immaculately. I don't know that I, I don't know that I even want to try and compete with this. But then I thought, okay, this is market validation, and you know what? I think there is room to tell stories about more female comedians because there can't just be one. You don't just have Jerry Seinfeld. You have a slew of other stories, other comedians. So then I just thought I'm going to go for it and put my own angle and my own spin on it. I like to laugh. I think humor is a nice way to say what you want to say openly, and it connects people. We all like to laugh. So I really wanted to use humor, and I don't see it a lot in fiction. I don't see it a lot in literary fiction. I wanted to see if I could work on something that felt a little bit elegant, but still have this kind of easygoing feel to it. I went to so many comedy clubs. I spent a lot of times in New York City comedy clubs specifically, but also all around the world. And just those little details about how they introduce the comedian to the stage, what kind of lighting they have, how many perform in an evening, what does it look like when a comedian totally bombs? How do they walk out after that? You know, all these tiny little details that make the writing feel real. And then one of the challenges for me was to make sure that the comedy was funny, but also to show an arc. So I needed her to be good and then better and then have a great set at the end. So how do I do that without putting the reader off at the beginning with something that may not hit perfectly, but there is some talent there, you know, so I needed that opening scene to be really, really sharp. And because my husband has worked with a lot of comedians, he sat with me and he would read the lines, like we would read lines aloud. And I think that really helped me because you need to hear it. But it also needs to make sense when you read it. When I lived in Greece and in parts of the Middle East and even in parts of, I'd say, the UK, there's a more collective society way of living. So you have extended family members and you have friends of your parents. And it's kind of like if you were at a family wedding all the time, you have to behave nicely because how you behave reflects on the wider family or your circle of friends or whatever. When you're in a city, a big city like proper London or in New York, you can just be who you are and it's very individual. And I'm not saying one is better than the other, and I've loved and lived both, but they are different, and I think you have to adapt a little bit. So taking from my own personal life when I was growing up in Greece and all these other countries, and my parents would try to tell us this is how a person of background should behave, and this is how you present yourself, and all of that. So I wanted to have an element of that with Mia. So she lives with her grandparents. In the book, she's lost her parents, so she lives with her two grandparents, and they kind of have a very traditional outlook on life. Put your head down, study hard, do a respectable job, and that's a good life. So just these strong work ethics, and that's fine. And the issue is Mia is passionate, and she wants to do comedy, and she wants to be funny, and she's in love with her boss, and he comes from a different background, and she's not sure how that would work. So it's just a very New York moment because people are coming from all over, and you have to figure out what matters most to you, but also how that sits within just the wider family. And I think that's where her background comes in. When she meets Phaedra, and you totally pronounced that correctly, it's actually a Greek name. I don't know why I threw that in there. It's not even an Arabic name. But I wanted something that sounded like a stage name and quite mythical, and to have that moment of like, okay, this is a little different. I wanted to just show that there are many different types of Arab women, and you can't put somebody in a box. So here, she was doing what she thought was proper, but then she meets Phaedra, who's wearing sequins, and she's got her boyfriend, and she's performing, and that's okay too, because everyone can live the way they want to live, and it's New York, and life is fine. And then she sees that it's kind of like what you were saying about your cousin. So he went to New York, and he was able to just be himself, and Mia, is living in New York, and she's thinking, and here's Feda, and she's here being herself. Maybe I can too. So it all leads to this climatic moment in the book where she performs this set, and as you said, somebody ends up recording her. She gets heckled, and then that moment goes viral because of that. And in her sets, she does tend to talk about cultural stereotyping and wanting to be more open and more inclusive and all the things that we were talking about earlier. So it's wrapped up in this beautiful message, but it also highlights some of the tensions that somebody might feel if they are othered, no matter what background they come from.